where the waves meet. Arrival. The old train slowly rolled into the station of the small seaside town of Willow Bay. Through the fogged-up window, Emma Harris saw narrow, ivy-covered streets, colorful houses with wooden porches, and street lamps whose light reflected off the wet pavement. It was early morning, and the fog clung tightly to the shore, leaving only the muffled echo of waves. Emma hadn't come here for adventure. She was running. From a broken engagement, from the suffocating city, from a life where everything felt wrong. In her bag were only a laptop, a sketchbook, and a letter from her grandmother that read, "If you ever feel like everything is falling apart, come to the sea. It knows how to heal." The house by the lighthouse. Her grandmother was gone now, but her house by the lighthouse stood just as Emma remembered from childhood. White walls, blue shutters, a creaky door. Inside, it smelled of salt and old books. She opened the window, and the cold sea wind rushed into the room, carrying the sound of the surf. Emma breathed deeply. It felt as though, with each breath, she was slowly shedding the weight of the past years. In the kitchen, she found an old box of photographs. In one picture, her grandmother was young, standing in front of the lighthouse beside an unfamiliar man. On the back, in faded ink, was written, "The summer when everything changed. Meeting at the pier." On her third day in town, Emma went to the dock. Fishermen were mending nets, children were feeding seagulls, and at the far end of the pier stood a man in a worn jacket, staring at the horizon. He noticed her and smiled, a little sadly but warmly. "You new here?" he asked. "I guess I am. I came from New York." "New York," he nodded. "Big cities have a way of breaking people. My name's Jack." And so their acquaintance began. Jack lived on a boat and went out to sea every morning. People said he had once been a world-class photographer, but after a tragedy, he vanished from the public eye. The secret in the photographs. One day, Jack invited Emma onto his boat. In the cabin hung photographs of raging storms, crimson sunsets, and the portrait of a woman. Her face was as mysterious as Jack's own gaze. "Who is she?" Emma asked softly. "Someone the sea took from me," he replied, turning away. Emma felt there was more to his story, something he wasn't ready to share. But there was already an invisible thread between them. Two lost souls who had found each other in this misty town, where the waves meet. They began meeting at the pier every morning. Jack taught her how to distinguish the sounds of the surf, to read the weather from the shade of the sky, and to tell who had walked the shore at night by the tracks in the sand. And one evening, as the sun sank into the crimson sea, he said, "You know, Emma, there's a place, they call it the point where waves meet. Two currents collide there, and the water churns like it's alive. They say if you make a wish there, it will come true." Emma thought about it. She didn't know if she wanted a new life or her old one back. But she knew one thing. For the first time in a long while, she wanted to believe. If you want, I can now continue this story in English to make it long, emotional, and with a beautiful ending. The journey to the point. The next morning, the wind carried the scent of rain, but Jack was already waiting at the pier with his small sailboat ready. "Still want to see the point?" he asked. Emma hesitated only for a moment before nodding. Something in his eyes told her this wasn't just a casual trip, it meant more. They set out just after sunrise. The sea was calm at first, the pale golden light shimmering on the waves. Jack handled the boat with practiced ease, his hands sure, his gaze fixed on the horizon. As they moved farther from the shore, the town of Willow Bay faded into a blur of colors. The wind picked up and the waves began to grow, rocking the boat gently at first, then with more force. "Almost there," Jack said over the sound of the wind. "You'll know it when you feel it." An hour later, Emma noticed a change. The water ahead seemed restless, swirling in strange patterns, as if invisible hands were stirring it. The currents collided, creating a whirlpool of foam and deep blue waves. Jack lowered the sails and let the boat drift. "This is it," he said softly, "the point where waves meet." Emma stood at the bow, the salty spray on her face, the air electric with something she couldn't name. She closed her eyes. She thought of the life she had left behind, of her grandmother's letter, of Jack standing beside her now. She whispered her wish into the wind. She would never tell anyone what it was, not even Jack. But as she opened her eyes, she swore she saw the sunlight break through the clouds in a way that felt like an answer. Jack watched her quietly, a faint smile on his lips, as though he understood more than he let on. The signal in the fog. The trip back from the point began peacefully, the boat gliding over calmer waves. Emma sat on the deck, watching seagulls dive for fish, her mind still lingering on the strange calm she felt after making her wish. But then the fog rolled in. It came quickly, a heavy, silver curtain swallowing the horizon. The sunlight dimmed, the air grew colder, and the cry of the gulls faded into silence. Jack's hands tightened on the tiller. "That's strange," he muttered. The forecast said nothing about fog today. Emma glanced at him. His voice had shifted, low and tense. "Is it dangerous?" "Not if we stay on course," he replied. "But fog like this, you can lose your sense of direction fast." Minutes turned into an hour. The mist was so thick that even the waves around them seemed like ghostly shadows. And then, through the dense whiteness, a sound cut the silence. 3 deep, mournful blasts of a horn. Emma froze. "Is that another boat?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "Maybe, but no one uses that signal anymore." The sound came again, closer this time. A low, haunting tone that seemed to vibrate in her bones. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. Suddenly, a dim shape began to emerge from the fog, tall, dark, and moving slowly toward them. It didn't look like any modern boat. Its silhouette was old, almost antique, with sails tattered as though they'd been weathered by decades of storms. Jack's voice was barely above a whisper. "That can't be real." Emma took a step closer to the edge of the deck, her heart pounding. The strange vessel loomed nearer, its horns sounding again, 3 long notes that echoed across the water. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished back into the mist. Jack started the engine, his jaw set. "We're heading back." "Now." Emma didn't argue. But deep down, she knew they had both seen something that wasn't supposed to exist. The legend of the Black Gull. By the time they reached the shore, the fog had begun to thin, and the sun broke through in pale streaks. Emma's legs still felt unsteady as she stepped onto the dock. Jack secured the boat without a word. His movements were quick, almost mechanical, and there was a look in his eyes that unsettled her, like a man trying to bury a memory before it could speak. She followed him down the pier. "Jack, what do we see out there?" He kept walking, but after a few steps, he stopped. Slowly, he turned to face her. "I didn't want you to know this part of the bay's history," he said, his voice heavy. "But you've seen it now. That was the Black Gull." Emma waited for him to continue. "It was a merchant ship back in the 1800s. Got caught in a storm right at the point where waves meet. The captain refused to turn back, said the sea was his to command. They say the currents swallowed the ship whole. No wreck was ever found." He looked past her, toward the horizon. "Some people say the Black Gull still sails in the fog, that it appears to those who have unfinished business with the sea." Emma's pulse quickened. "And you think it appeared to you for that reason?" Jack's gaze darkened. "I know it did. I've seen it before." The words hung between them like a storm cloud. Emma felt a shiver run through her, not just because of the ship, but because of the man in front of her. She realized that whatever Jack's past was, it was far more tangled with the sea than she'd imagined. He started walking again, but before they reached the lighthouse, he added quietly, almost to himself, "The last time I saw the Black Gull, I lost someone. Tides of the past." The next morning, Emma found Jack already sitting on the lighthouse steps, staring out at the gray expanse of the sea. A thermos of coffee sat beside him, untouched. She hesitated before approaching. "Jack, who did you lose?" He didn't look at her. His hands were clasped tightly, knuckles white. Her name was Margaret. The name didn't ring a bell, but the way he said it, like each syllable hurt, made her stay quiet. "She was my wife," he continued after a long pause. "We lived here, in Willow Bay, almost 20 years ago. She loved the sea even more than I did. One summer, she went out sailing alone, just before a storm rolled in. I was supposed to meet her at the point where waves meet, But when I got there, all I saw was the black gull in the fog. Emma's breath caught. And Margaret? His eyes finally met hers, and she saw the weight in them. She never came back. No wreckage, no body. Just gone. The locals told me that sometimes the sea doesn't take people to the bottom. It takes them somewhere else. And the black gull, it's the ferry. Emma's skin prickled. She wanted to tell him it was just a legend, but something deep inside her whispered otherwise. Jack's voice dropped lower. Your grandmother knew about it too. Emma's heart skipped. My grandmother? Yeah. Years ago, before Margaret disappeared, your grandmother warned us both never to sail to the point when the currents were restless. She said her own family had lost someone the same way. I think that's why she built this house so close to the lighthouse. She wanted to watch the sea, as if it might one day return what it had taken. Emma looked toward the waves, her mind spinning. If that was true, then her trip here wasn't just an escape. It was the next chapter in a story that had been unfolding long before she was born. The letter in the floorboards. That night, the wind rattled the shutters of the lighthouse house, and Emma couldn't sleep. Jack's words kept circling in her mind, each one dragging her deeper into a place she wasn't sure she wanted to go. She finally got up and wandered into the small upstairs study, the room her grandmother had always kept locked when Emma was a child. The key still hung on the wall. The floor creaked beneath her feet as she stepped inside. Dust floated in the moonlight, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and salt. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old books on maritime history, navigation charts, and journals with cracked leather covers. Emma's gaze caught on a loose floorboard near the writing desk. Kneeling, she pried it up, her fingers trembling slightly. Beneath it was a small tin box, its lid rusted at the edges. Inside, wrapped in yellowed paper, was a letter. The handwriting was her grandmother's, looping, strong, unmistakable. She unfolded it carefully. Emma, if you are reading this, then the sea has already called you. Do not take its whispers lightly. In our family, the waves have always carried more than water. They carry debts, and they remember names. The ship you may see is called the Black Gull. It will come in fog when the wind is wrong and the currents meet. It takes those who are marked by the sea's sorrow. It took my brother, and I believe it will come again. If it does, know this, it does not always take without choice. Sometimes it offers a trade, but the price will be yours to decide. Emma's hands shook as she finished reading. Her grandmother had known. She had even hinted at a way to bargain with the Black Gull. From the dark window, she could hear the low hum of the waves. For the first time, the sound didn't feel like background noise. It felt like something listening. The bargain. The next morning, Emma found Jack in the boathouse, repairing a torn sail. The light streaming through the open doors framed him in a way that made him look older, wearier, like the weight of years at sea was finally pressing down on him. She hesitated, then stepped inside, clutching her grandmother's letter. Jack, I found something you need to see. He took the letter, scanning the words in silence. When he reached the part about a trade, his jaw tightened. So she knew, he said quietly. I always suspected. Emma leaned against the wooden wall. Do you think it's true? That the Black Gull can give someone back? Jack set the letter down on the workbench. His eyes were fixed on the floor. If it's a lie, it's a cruel one. If it's the truth, it's the only way I'll ever see Margaret again. Her chest tightened. Jack, you can't. Emma. His voice was low but firm. You didn't see her face the last time I did. She was reaching for me through the fog, and I couldn't get to her. I've lived every day since wondering if I could have done something more. If there's a way to bring her back, I'll take it. Emma shook her head. But what would it take from you? Jack gave a bitter smile. The sea never asks for money. It asks for what matters most. I know the risk. Outside, the waves slammed against the pier, as if the sea itself was listening. Jack looked past her toward the open water. The currents will meet again soon, and when they do, I'll be there. Emma realized then that she had only two choices. Let him go to the point alone, or go with him and face whatever the Black Gull demanded. The restless sea. By late afternoon, the wind had shifted. The smell of salt was sharper, the air heavier. The gulls that usually circled above the harbor had vanished, as if sensing something unseen. Emma stood on the lighthouse balcony, watching the horizon. A line of darker water was forming far out at sea, twisting and curling as if the ocean was rolling in its sleep. She went down to the pier, where Jack was already loading supplies into the boat. His movements were quick and precise, but his expression was grim. "The currents are changing earlier than I thought," he said. "Without looking up, if we wait until morning, we might miss it entirely, or it might miss us." Emma felt the tension in the air, as if the whole bay was holding its breath. She knew what he meant. The black gull would not appear just anywhere, would come where the two tides collided, and only for a short time. "So we go tonight," she said. Jack met her eyes and nodded. The last light of the day was fading, turning the water into a sheet of black glass in the distance. The first fingers of fog were already curling toward the shore. They pushed off into the deepening night. The sea was calm for the first mile. Then slowly the swells began to rise. The boat rocked gently, then harder. With each passing minute, the sound of the waves grew louder until it was all Emma could hear. And then she felt the strange pull beneath the surface, as if the sea itself was breathing, drawing them toward the point where the waves met. The shape in the mist. The fog thickened so fast, it was like a wall closing in around them. One moment Emma could see the faint outline of the shore behind them. The next, it was gone. The only sound was the slow, steady rhythm of the waves and the occasional creak of the boat. Jack stood at the helm, his eyes fixed ahead. Emma sat near the bow, gripping the railing. The air felt heavier, colder, each breath tasting of salt and something older, something that did not belong to this world. A faint sound drifted through the mist, low and deep, 3 drawn-out blasts. Emma froze. Jack's hands tightened on the tiller. "That's it," he said, his voice low. The black gull. The fog shifted and a shadow began to take shape, a tall silhouette rising from the water like some ancient beast. The masts were impossibly high, the sails torn and flapping. Without wind, the hull was black, slick with age, and dripping as though it had just emerged from the depths. Emma's stomach knotted. Every instinct told her to look away, but she couldn't. The ship was gliding toward them silently despite the groan of its wooden frame. Jack took a step forward toward the edge of the deck. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from something else, hope. "Margaret," he whispered. Emma's breath caught. She followed his gaze and saw movement on the ghost ship's deck, a figure standing near the bow, the outline of a woman, hair whipping in an unseen wind. Her arm lifted slowly, reaching out toward them. The boat shuddered as if caught in a tide. Emma grabbed Jack's arm, but he did not move. His eyes were locked on the figure in the mist. The black gull was close enough now that Emma could see the glint of lantern light along its rail, and in that dim flicker, she realized the woman was staring at her too. The choice. The mist swirled around them as the black gull loomed. So close Emma could hear the slow groan of its timbers. Each sound felt alive, like the ship itself was breathing. The woman on the deck stepped forward. Lantern light caught her face, pale and beautiful, yet touched by something distant, something not quite human. Her lips moved, and a voice drifted across the water, low and steady, carrying words that seemed to echo inside Emma's chest. "Bring him to me, and I will give him back what was taken." Emma's grip on the railing tightened. She knew, without asking, that the woman meant Margaret. She was offering Jack the life he had been chasing in his grief. Jack's eyes shone with a mix of hope and fear. His voice was barely a whisper. "Do you hear her? She can bring her back, Emma. She can fix everything." Emma's heartbeat pounded in her ears. The sea rocked the boat, pulling them closer to the black gull. The figure's eyes never left hers. But a cold understanding was growing inside her. The sea does not give without taking, and if it gave Margaret back, it would take something else in her place. Emma took a step toward Jack. Her voice shook. "You don't know what the price is, Jack." "I don't care," he said. "If it means seeing her again, I'll pay it." The ship drifted closer. The waves surged around them. Emma could almost touch the rotting wood of the black gull. She knew the moment to decide was now. She could let Jack step aboard and vanish into whatever world awaited him, or she could pull him back, break the connection, and risk never knowing what might have been true. The pull of the deep. The boat pitched hard to one side as another wave struck, sending cold spray across Emma's face. Jack moved toward the edge, one hand reaching out toward the figure on the black gull. Emma's mind screamed at her to act, but her body felt rooted to the deck. The woman's eyes were locked on her, unblinking. Her voice slid through the fog again, softer this time, yet sharper than any blade. One leaves, one stays, choose. Jack's boots scraped the slick wood as he leaned forward. His fingers were only inches from the ghost ship's rail. Emma lunged, grabbing his arm with both hands. The sea seemed to push back, pulling him toward the black gull with invisible threads. Jack twisted, trying to shake free. You don't understand, Emma. I can't live without her. Her grip tightened, her voice cracked. I can't lose you to this. You're still here. She isn't. The waves surged again. The boat slammed against something unseen, jolting them both forward. Emma's foot slipped on the wet deck, and for a moment she thought the sea had her too. Then she saw it. The figure on the black gull had lowered her hand, and her face had changed. The beauty faded, replaced by something hollow and endless eyes like black water staring right into her. Emma yanked Jack back with all her strength. He fell hard onto the deck, the breath knocked out of him. The black gull began to drift away, the fog swallowing it once more. The woman's voice faded into nothing but the hiss of the waves. Jack lay on the deck, gasping, looking at her, as if seeing her for the first time. You shouldn't have done that. Emma stared into the fog where the ship had vanished. Her hands were still shaking. She knew the sea had not forgiven her for this, and deep down, she feared it would come again. The shore that changed. The boat glided into the harbor under a sky that seemed too still. The water in Willow Bay was darker than Emma remembered, as if the sea had drawn its color from the deepest part of the night. They tied the boat in silence, Jack's movements stiff, Emma's hands numb from gripping the rope. The few lights along the pier flickered in the breeze, though the wind was barely there. As they stepped onto the dock, Emma noticed something wrong. The air smelled different, not just salt, but something sour and metallic. The gulls were gone again, and the usual murmur of waves on the shore was replaced by a slow, uneven slosh, like the sea was breathing in time with their steps. They reached the lighthouse, and Emma froze. The tide was higher than it should have been at this hour. The water lapped against the bottom steps, leaving dark trails of foam that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Jack finally spoke, his voice flat. The sea isn't done with us. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The sound of the water outside had changed from a whisper to a steady knocking, as if something was pressing against the shore again. And again she got up and looked out the window. For a moment, she thought she saw movement in the shallows, a dark shape gliding just beneath the surface, too large to be a fish, too slow to be a wave. It lingered there before sliding back into the blackness. When she turned from the window, she found Jack standing in the doorway of her room, his face pale, his eyes hollow. I heard her voice again, he said. The call in the night. The lighthouse walls groaned in the wind, though the air outside was calm. Jack stood motionless in the doorway, his expression caught between fear and longing. Emma felt the weight of his words sink into her. She heard her voice again. Jack turned and walked down the hallway without another word. Emma followed barefoot, her steps silent against the old wooden floor. He moved like a man in a dream, heading straight for the stairs and out into the cold night. The tide was even higher now. The waves glistened under the pale moon, their crests faintly glowing, as if lit from beneath. The air was thick, heavy, and every breath Emma took felt damp in her lungs. Jack stepped onto the wet sand. His eyes were locked on the dark horizon. Emma could hear it too now, a faint melody weaving through the crash of the surf, a woman's voice low and coaxing, pulling at something deep inside both of them. You can still have her, Jack whispered without turning. He stepped deeper into the water. The cold foam swirled around his boots, then his knees. Emma's chest tightened. She ran forward, grabbing his arm. The voice seemed to grow louder, wrapping around them like the fog. At sea, her grip was weak against the pull he was under, and for a moment she thought he would slip from her grasp. Then a wave rose higher than the rest, curling toward them, and breaking hard. The force knocked both of them back into the shallows. Emma gasped for air, and when she looked again, the glowing tide had dimmed, the voice gone. Jack lay on the wet sand, shaking his head slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep. Emma could still hear the echo of the voice fading inside her mind, and she knew this was only the beginning. What the tide left behind. Morning came with a gray sky and a sea that looked deceptively calm. Emma had barely slept. The sound of the voice lingered in her head like an echo. She couldn't shake. Jack hadn't spoken since the night before. When she stepped outside, the air was heavy with the smell of salt, and something sharp, almost metallic. The tide had pulled back, but the beach looked wrong. Dark, wet patches marked the sand in strange patterns, as if something large had been dragged across it. She walked toward the water. Jack, following silently behind a cluster of driftwood, she stopped short. It was a piece of wood, blackened and warped, but unmistakably part of a ship's hull. Its edges were slick with seaweed, and something darker clung to it, almost like soot carved faintly into the surface. Was a name. Black Gull. Emma's stomach turned. She looked at Jack, but his face had gone pale. His hands trembled as he reached for the wood, tracing the letters with his fingertips. This shouldn't be here, he whispered. That ship doesn't leave pieces behind, not unless it wants to. Emma glanced toward the horizon. The water was still, but it felt watchful. The fragment of the ship lay between them and the sea, like a warning or an invitation. She couldn't decide which. As they turned to head back to the lighthouse, she noticed something else in the sand just beyond the wreckage, a footprint smaller than Jack's and deeper than hers, as if someone had been standing there watching them before vanishing into the tide. The visitor. That night the wind picked up, rattling the lighthouse windows. The air felt colder than it had in weeks. Emma sat at the kitchen table, staring at the footprint she had sketched earlier on a scrap of paper. The shape was strange, narrower than an average foot, the arch impossibly high, and the toes long, as if they belonged to something built for swimming. Jack paced near the door, his eyes fixed on the dark shore. He had said almost nothing since they found the fragment of the Black Gull, but Emma could feel the restlessness in him, like a current beneath the surface. Just past midnight, a knock echoed through the lighthouse, 3 sharp raps against the heavy wood door. Emma froze. Jack's head snapped toward the sound. No one ever came out here after dark. The road to the lighthouse was long and steep, and the fishermen in Willow Bay swore off visiting it at night. The knock came again, louder this time. Emma glanced toward the window, but the porch was swallowed in shadow. She opened the door a crack. A woman stood there, drenched from head to toe. Her hair clung to her face, her skin pale and almost luminous in the moonlight. She wore a dress that looked decades out of place, its fabric heavy with seawater. Her eyes locked on Emma's, and for a moment Emma forgot how to breathe. "You pulled him back," she said. Her voice was low, but each word was sharp. "You denied the sea its due." Emma's grip tightened on the doorframe. Jack stepped closer, his voice rough. "Who are you?" The woman's lips curved into something between a smile and a warning. "You already know." Before either of them could speak again, she turned and walked toward the shore. Each step left a wet print on the wooden porch, then vanished into the sand without sinking. Emma felt the cold settle deep into her bones. The footprint in the morning sand had not been a warning, it had been a promise. Into the water. Jack moved first, grabbing a lantern from the hook by the door. Emma followed, close behind, the cold night air cutting through her as they hurried down the narrow path to the shore. The woman's figure was just ahead, her dress dragging across the wet sand, leaving no trail behind. The sea was calm, unnaturally calm, the kind of stillness that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. The woman never looked back, never slowed. Her pale hands brushed the air at her sides, as if guiding an invisible thread between her and the water. When she reached the tide line, she stopped. The lantern light caught her face, and Emma felt her chest tighten. It was the same face she had seen on the deck of the Black Gull the night at the point, but now the eyes were sharper and colder. Jack stepped forward. "What do you want from us?" The woman's gaze moved from him to Emma. "I do not want you, I want balance. You pulled him from the sea, and so the sea will take in return." Emma's hands clenched. She wanted to speak, to argue, but the waves behind the woman began to rise. Though no wind touched them, the water swelled and parted, and from it emerged shapes Emma could barely understand, figures walking just beneath the surface, their faces blurred by the current. Yet one of them stepped closer, and the lantern light revealed her clearly. "Margaret." Jack staggered forward, his voice breaking. "Margaret." Margaret's face was soft and human, her eyes full of something between longing and sorrow. She reached out a hand, but her body never left the water. Emma saw then that her arm was not held out to Jack, but to her. Emma's throat tightened. The pale woman beside Margaret spoke again. The sea does not forget, it will take a name. Emma realized with a shock that this was the choice her grandmother had written about. Someone had to go, either Jack, Margaret, or herself. The black gold bargain was not about mercy, it was about balance. The waves began to curl higher around their ankles. Jack was shouting something, but the water roared too loud. Emma felt the pull of the tide, not just on her body, but inside her mind, an invitation and a command. She looked once at Jack, once at Margaret, and stepped forward into the water. Cold swallowed her instantly. The world above blurred into silver and shadow. The last thing she saw was Jack's face reaching for her before the sea closed over her head. When the water stilled, the shore was empty. The lantern lay in the sand, still burning, but there were only two sets of footprints, now leading back toward the lighthouse. Jack's, and another set, smaller and lighter, walking beside him. The black gull had its balance, and somewhere in the deep, Emma opened her eyes.